If God had wanted man to fly,
He would have given him wings, Mr. Kid.
Okay, what we need to do is turn our attention back to this whole idea of recoding a better human from the ground up, that meddling with our DNA. Now, if you don't know what DNA is and what it isn't and what it's for, you need to stop this video and go watch some Crash Course Biology right here on YouTube. Hank Green is awesome and he'll do a great job of explaining it, because if you don't know what DNA is for and how big of a deal it really is, you need to know, and you're going to be completely lost for the rest of the video. Everybody who's watching, you could keep listening to me droning on about DNA, but I thought I would find an actual expert in the field, so I'm here with Dr. Michael Baker, PhD. So, Dr. Baker, where do you work, or what do you currently do with genetics?
Currently, I'm working at a fertility clinic. I did my PhD at UT Southwestern in reproductive genetics, studied the genes that are important in fertility in mice, and their applications in humans. We currently have limited use for clinical genetics in the fertility clinic. We have to be very targeted in our pre-implantation genetic diagnostics, or we can do pre-implantation genetic screening, which is solely chromosome numbers and to some extent, translocations, deletions, or duplications.
What would that imply? Like, what would any problems there imply?
So, abnormal chromosome numbers will almost always end in a non-viable pregnancy, miscarriage. There are a few chromosome abnormalities, such as trisomy 21, which could result in a child with Down syndrome, and we can screen for all of those chromosome abnormalities and ensure that the embryo that we're transferring is at least chromosomally normal, reducing a lot of the miscarriage rate and helping out patients who have had multiple miscarriages, multiple failed IVF attempts. In order to maximize their pregnancy chances.
That's amazing, actually. I didn't even know that. That's pretty cool that y'all can do that now.
What
are the challenges?
I want to put in the video is as we are screening for the normal number of chromosomes, we also find out the sex chromosomes, and so before we even transfer the embryo, you can tell whether it's a boy or a girl.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, is that in the future, do you think that would be, like, in the near future or far future, something that, I mean, I know in IVF, that's something that you would have a range, you would have a number of viable embryos, and you could pick a gender, but let's say if you had a female gender with double X, could you alter it to a male, or vice versa?
We don't have the technology to completely replace a chromosome at the moment. And in the embryology lab, it would be easier to make another embryo with a 50-50 chance of being a boy or a girl.
Right. Than having to do all that altering. Than
trying to swap out an entire chromosome.
Makes sense. Okay. But what about, say, more specific traits? I mean, I have read that we have decoded a lot of the DNA in the human genome, and we're learning more and more about it. Is it possible in the near future to be able to select for certain traits that you would want, maybe starting with basic ones, but as we get better and better at it, even more advanced things?
Currently, we can screen for single gene defects such as cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, Fragile X syndrome. These genes are very simple monogene defects. We can look at one small region of the genetic code and determine whether or not the embryo contains that. Currently, there's research going on in order to potentially alter those single genes, either at the single cell fertilized egg, which would be the most the earliest and most complete genetic alteration you could do to any human would be to alter that single cell, because as that cell divides, every single cell after would contain that modification.
Right.
So in order to potentially make a affected embryo normal, there are a number of genetic tools that could be used in order to either repair or replace small portions of DNA. And that's looking at subsets of genes, maybe an entire gene or a small section of a chromosome. But replacing whole chromosomes would be a monumental task.
Right.
So
you mentioned these viral vectors. Is this really the primary method that we know of right now for delivering any kind of gene therapy, is through these kind of, I guess you say, man-made viruses that have sections of DNA that we're trying to give a patient?
Yeah, so the most effective way we've found to modify a cell's behavior is to find a virus that will that has probably already been designed through years of evolution to attack a certain type of cell, and then we can sort of hijack the machinery of that virus so that it can we put in our own DNA into the virus, and it attaches, it identifies the cell target that we'd be interested in, and it would inject the our target DNA just as it would have naturally injected the viral DNA.
Okay.
Diseases such as Alzheimer's or multiple sclerosis, some of the more complex diseases would pose a much greater challenge for gene therapy, as we don't fully understand the genetic code. Although we've sequenced our entire genome, we know of genes and a few of the regulatory sequences in between the genes, but a large portion of the human genome is junk DNA, and that's junk DNA just because we don't understand what that is doing. Any alterations to that could have unknown consequences on any human trials.
Gotcha. Wow. So I have to kind of finish with the question that my students ask me the most. And I think I know the answer, but I want them to hear it from you rather than me, because what they all want to know is when they get wings and horns and breathe water, and that's what they think of when they think of gene therapy. So, Dr. Baker, what is it going to take for my students to have wings? They are dying to know.
For your students to have wings, it would probably take growing the wings and attaching them surgically. If
they can't be born with them?
If maybe your next generation of students could be born with wings, if science can completely comprehend the human genome enough to and development to hard code into the DNA so that it would just be very difficult.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Well, that's all I've got for you. I hugely appreciate your time and your help. Is there any closing thoughts that you have that you want to add to it?
My final thought or final concern would be when you start talking about modifying, say, a fertilized egg at the earliest point of human life, you can easily justify changing a gene to save a disease, or to save somebody from years of suffering, but then it's a slippery slope. Are you going to change a gene to save somebody years of suffering from male pattern baldness? And then if you're going to start working on superficial things such as hair loss, then why not skin color, physical traits, beauty, intelligence, strength. If you could make your child faster, stronger, better basketball player, would you do that? It's a slippery slope.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your time.
Look forward to seeing your videos.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Building a better human, whether through genetics or engineering, is only a matter of time. In fact, as you've seen in this video, we're pretty much right there. We're already starting to do some of the most exciting things that these technologies have been promising us for decades. So whether one blazes the trail and the other catches up or vice versa, in the end, it will probably be some combination of the two technologies that we end up with. But right now, while we're still just in the infancy of these technologies, we need to answer some really, really monumentally human race altering questions, like if we go too far with gene therapy, do we create beings which aren't human anymore? Or should designer babies even be a thing at all? Or if this technology is so expensive that only the richest and most privileged of us have access to it, what happens to those of us that are getting left behind? And by the way, how much of a person can you really replace with cybernetics before they're not technically themselves anymore? I really want to hear from you guys on not just these questions, but any of the questions that you think of while watching these videos. Yes, you, YouTube, right here in the comments, let me know some of the questions that you have. Let's talk about some of this stuff. But in the meantime, I will see you next week.